Alright, I've cobbled together another piece of paper big enough for the vamp. And let's just knock this out real quick because it's pretty basic and it's all here. The only thing that you really want to pay attention to is your alignment points with the feather line, with the lasting allowance, and with the stay. The rest we've all sort of worked out already, so we can pretty much just hack this out and be done with it. This cardboard is going to cost me a fortune in pencil leads. Alright, so like I said, we put a prick in here earlier. We just make sure we're on the cut board. Try and get this in frame. So we've marked our original point where the quarter begins. And what else do we have? Quarter. So mark quartering. We don't need to go around for the rest of the quarter, but we want the tongue. Right, the tongue's easy. We want a lasting allowance, a machining allowance, and we can just break that in. Now, a little trick on the lasting allowance, right? Again, so that you want to reduce material from the point where the quarter will line up, right? So where this prick mark is, go behind it about 2 mils, all right? And then give it a 45-degree cutoff. 45 degrees. Because this corner, during lasting, will get mangled and stretched and honestly creates a weak point, especially in machine manufacturing. The roughing tends to, this creates a high spot if you don't do this, and so when you rough it, it'll tend to break your stitching. So by doing this, it gives the quarter more purchase on the on the insole board underneath. Give you a much neater overall result, and it's always good practice just to check that you line up precisely with your actual quarter pattern that you've made, and you do that just by running over it. You can throw your eyelet marks in if you really want. It'll give you a bit of an extra idea of where to hook this tongue, and you just put a slot in here basically. That's going to be an okay sort of shape for press knives, and it's going to be it's going to be an absolutely fine shape to do by hand as well. And you'll notice from our original sketch that we did on the last that the tongue, we want this slot to open up when we actually make the shoe, but to make the vamp all in one piece and the tongue all in one piece, we've sprung it down. And this is a relatively simple example of springing. Well, that's what my teachers called it. It's springing. You're springing this shape, and that's it. Cut it out. Actually make an absolute mess of this. Cut the top too low. Rusty. That's terrible. I can't get my head right in either, otherwise you won't see nothing. Which doesn't help. Always have a centre mark, and on the Vamp have a generous one. Most leathers that people are making. Alright, so the first thing that I'm going to look at, that I'm seeing now that I've opened this up, is the thing that always happens when you make symmetrical patterns like this, and that is you get these ugly bumps. Alright, you notice that this is very spade-like and pointy. Now look at the shape we're actually trying to make here. Alright, so I would be tempted to literally just round this off, you know. However, if this is your first attempt, you're using this to try and learn how to make your patterns better, make it and see how it differs, right? Because I'm pretty sure if I last this, when I pull the toe over, it's probably going to come down to about here. Right? So if we're imagining this is where we would pull the last down, alright? Just because, you know, I've made shoes on this last before, it's been a while, but it should look less pointy, you know, less like a card symbol and more like a shoe pattern, right? And probably going to have some issues too. And the best way to fix this is just to pull the pattern and then subtract the difference. So if I pulled the pattern and it was this long and I want it to be this short, then you just take that off, right? Simple. But this is where you really need to invest in pulling a prototype, which you'd make out of cheap leather, and you'd probably even take as many shortcuts with machining. Like if you want double stitching, you might only stitch it once, just so you can quickly see how it goes together and fits on the last. And you might be wondering, how the hell does all this go together? Well, you cut two of these and then you put them face to face, you do a close seam and then pull that inside out and then give it a bit of a rub. You'll have to skive the edge for a close seam. Don't really have a lot of leather, but you know, a close seam will look something like that, but on a bigger scale. So you want to just skive it. Skiving, well, I'm thinking about skiving. A lot of you people, a lot of videos have got you people picking up fancy knives and making, you know, custom knives, and you know, look, if you want to skive your leather, all you need is a sharp knife and a good technique. And the good technique centers around simply holding the angle correctly and trying to understand what you're doing, you know. So let's give this a really small angle, and you can literally just take that off. And you know, as far as I'm seeing on videos on YouTube, this is a lot quicker and a lot more controlled than almost any of the tools. And if I haven't done this in ages, and I didn't used to do this as a matter of course because we had machines to do this, but every now and then you might want to skive a leather counter or something. So, you know, this sort of being able to do something like this with just, you know, $2 knife off the shelf is really good. But again, the knife is not the point. You need something sharp. When I was working in the factory, I had these ones, which are absolutely great. They're as sharp as blazes. They're relatively cheap. They're also lubricated with a bit of oil, which is just heavenly when you've got to cut out 150 pairs or something. A couple of years back I went onto their website and found these ones, and these are slightly longer and they're blacker, and I cannot believe it, but they're actually sharper. They're freaking brilliant, and if you seriously want to plough through some leather or even just some cardboard like I have here tonight, then get yourself at least try some of the alpha blades that you can find on their website. Just do a search for alpha, you'll find them. They're great. And yeah, I still have my old clicking knife. It's a wonderful tool for cleaning all sorts of hideous things. And you know, I still got my Skyver knife too. You know, the biggest drawback with all these tools is sharpness. They're never going to be as sharp as this blooming thing. This thing will shave the blooming hair off the fleet. You know, I mean, you can literally plough through it. It's amazing stuff. Alright, so how does this go together? Lining, knives are cool. You gotta love knives. Alright, so you stitch that together like that. You've done your close seam, so this is mirrored. And the way you'd stitch this together is you'd stitch the close seam, and then again, face to face, you'd do the thing. And what you're going to notice when you stitch this up is, okay, so I've made a mistake on this, and that is the lining is a bit close here. You probably want closer to 3mm gap there if you're making something like your average school shoe here, with a black Cambria lining and you know, just a school leather. So you stitch those face to face and then you pull them inside out, and when you've got them inside out, the Vamp should go in between the lining and the quarter. And this is a step you should do, which actually shows how bad this pattern is, because the slot seems a bit tight, so I'm just opening that slot up a little bit. Hack. Again, demonstration purposes, people, this is really bad. So it needs to sort of sit there, align with your line, obviously. I'm not doing this to nobody see anything. So, fold your Vamp up. Alright, so the lining you want under the Vamp when you machine this. You should do this with the pattern. I usually do this with the pattern before it run off and say, yeah, it's done. Still seems a bit tight, because or did I make a mistake? Probably made another mistake. Watch. Yeah, look at that. Alright, so this has to come off, that's why it doesn't fit. Haven't made a pattern in years, people. Okay, so just line this up. There's too many lines there to see what I was actually doing. So we take this 45-degree angle off the machining allowance on the Vamp, and for machining, look, you can cut slots in here and put pencil, put white marker or whatever. Prick is all you need. Put a prick there, and because there's nothing to see there, you're probably going to forget it. You want to put an indicator there. used to just use shorthand like X, and that was for the knife maker. So the X would stand for external, and because the mark is a triangle on the edge, he knows that we want a tiny little edge marker, so that when the press knives come back, they'll have a little bump in there, so that nobody needs to mark this, right? And you'll probably have prick markers for the rest of the marker too, so you don't even have to hit it with a pencil. Now the trick is with prick markers, if you're going to use them for the stay alignment, is you have to come back from the actual point from the actual mark, right? Because when the machinist gets the leather, she's going to grab the quarter, she's going to grab this part of the quarter, and she's going to stick it right on this mark that I've made here, right? And she's going to hold it so that everything pivots, right? And then she's going to line up the top one here, and then she's going to whack it straight through the machine. And a good machinist will do this alignment in a way that you can't even see. They'll do it in the machine as they're putting the pieces in there. None of this gluing and crap. They just whack it in and do it. So, if we're going to mark it that way, we're going to come in about 1 mil, maybe 2 mil, depends on how big our press knife pricks are. But this is just a small one, and we're doing this by hand, so just whack it in there just a little bit behind, so that when you come to machining, you're not aligning to the pricks, you're covering the pricks, right? So that when you last the shoe, there will be no sign of any of the code that you're using to align this shoe up, right? And if you look at an existing shoe, you can see this code. Alright, here's a Nike, and the easiest place to see it is at the center of the toe. There will be a tiny little blip, and that is exactly what I've just told my press knife maker to make here, is a tiny little prick. Probably can't see that, can you? But anyway, trust me, have a look at your own shoes, and you'll start seeing them everywhere. Wherever two pieces meet, it's a common way to have a little mark. And if we were going to make these for press knives, we'd put a size code in the bottom too. And this is a 10.5, so the size code would be Roman numerals 10. Would be a Roman numerals 10.5 or whatever. But because we're making 0.5, whatever, because it's a code, we mark a 10 as a large V, and we can make the 5 just a small V, probably with a gap. Or something like that. It's been a while. You're not going to worry about that, so don't worry about it. But yeah, that's your dirt. And you want to start with this because you need to know about the relationship with the upper with the ankle. You need to understand, how to do a pocket for a counter, yeah. And by doing a lining like this, hopefully you'll realise that although you can do certain things, you probably don't want to, which is why you're going to look for which is why the derbies are an eternal pattern, because of these things. No other shoe is done. This is a very elegant solution for making a shoe. And I think that's it. Oh, thank God we've finished derbies. Let's make something fun. I hear you kids are into Air Jordans. Air Jordan 11 just came out? Yeah. It's got a fun back and top line. Let's have a go and see how we might do that. Have fun.